By what measure do we determine how scary a horror movie is? Some of us are afraid of otherworldly threats and the unexplainable, and others are far more affected by being shown what the human mind is capable of. While the overall consensus seems to be that atmosphere usually trumps gore, that is not to say that blood and gunk should necessarily be written off as nothing more than shallow shock value. After all, aren't we all afraid of facing our own bloody mortality to some degree? What can be considered scary is obviously subjective, but there are movies out there that send a chill down near everyone's spine that watches. These are the films that provide more than just a momentary release of something classically frightening, and stay with you long after the credits roll by setting up camp in your mind. While the haunting can be quite literal with some of these paranormal entities, it is also true that the memories of these movies are enough to last a lifetime. If only for the horrifying possibilities they bring crashing into reality. Scary doesn't seem so important when we look at what's scarring instead, does it? I am the ghostly presence of Ash from What Culture, and these are 10 creepy horror movies that will haunt you forever. 10. The Others. Sometimes you just can't beat a classic period haunted house movie, complete with cliché tropes and all. And one of the best examples of the gothic haunted house subgenre is Alejandro Amenabar's The Others. Very few horror films have come close to matching the chilling atmosphere and underlying dread of this film. It plays out rather like a love letter to supernatural chillers like The Innocents or The Uninvited. There are numerous scenes in The Others that are legitimately horrifying, but by far the most notable is the "What have you done with my daughter" scene. Unless you're superhuman, it will take you a while to recover from that particular gem. This movie isn't free of loud bangs, jumps, and jolts. However, Amenabar proved that not all such scares are necessarily cheap, or substitute momentary surprise for genuine horror. These instances are included sparingly, and are all accompanied by an overwhelmingly sinister atmosphere to justify them. And it's the sort of spin that leaves you questioning what you watch and how you perceive it in every film you see afterwards. The Others haunts you with its one unavoidable driving force: that the truth is all about perspective. 9. When a Stranger Calls. In all honesty, When a Stranger Calls deserves to be mentioned only for its spine-chilling opening scenario, as it's the sort that will have you leaving the lights on at night and sleeping on the sofa should you not bear to go up to bed. It is masterfully paced and unmatched in suspense, making it one of the all-time great horror film openings, seeing a babysitter receive a barrage of creepy phone calls before the police discern that someone is upstairs, has killed the children, and is coming for her next. The call was coming from inside the house! There's something inherently scary about urban legends such as this one, and the classic babysitter and the intruder upstairs story is terrifying enough in concept alone that it will have you forever reconsidering if you really need to go upstairs again. The suspenseful accompanying score, Carol Kane's brilliant, wide-eyed performance, and the blood-curdling rasp of "why haven't you checked the children" down the phone all contribute to an unbearably chilling scene. It is so iconic that Kevin Williamson even wrote Drew Barrymore's death scene in Scream as a homage to When a Stranger Calls. 8. Lake Mungo. This Australian gem has gradually begun to find an audience. However, it is still criminally underseen. Of all the found footage or faux documentary horror films to come out since the Blair Witch Project, Lake Mungo is by far the most convincing, and that is the result of some absolutely fantastic performances. The film documents a grieving family as they piece together information about their daughter's secret life, in an attempt to get to the bottom of the circumstances leading up to her drowning. Lake Mungo is far more than just a collection of frights. The mystery at the heart of the film is gripping. The viewer finds himself so invested and drawn in that when the film's big, horrifying moment comes up, they are caught completely off guard. This moment offers one of the best examples of a jump scare done right. Camera phone footage is recovered showing Alice suddenly confronted by her own bloated and rotting corpse just before her death. And the closing credits are actually scarier than the film itself, believe it or not. A slideshow of family photographs is played, each zoomed in to reveal the ghostly image of Alice standing in the background. It is not one that is easily forgotten. 7. The Orphanage. The anticipation of something frightening is far scarier than its realization, and The Orphanage is the perfect example of a film that clearly understands this. The film works as well as it does because it's mainly anticipation, broken every now and again by a shocking image or occasional jolt, but it is never overdone to the point of diminishing the tension simmering away throughout. The film's big twist is equally as heartbreaking as it is horrifying. It's a heavily romanticized ghost story, with the gothic house setting, the games and cryptic clues, and the story's unmistakable fairy tale feel. All of this is suddenly juxtaposed with the real and harsh reality of Simon's fate, which is far scarier and more cruel than if he had been simply taken away to Neverland by his ghostly companions. We let ourselves get so carried away by the otherworldly, fairy tale feel of the film that when the truth finally hits, we're faced with a whole different and crushingly real type of horror. 6. The Woman in Black. No, not the Daniel Radcliffe version. This low-budget, made-for-TV adaptation is far superior, and far scarier. Pauline Moran's titular Woman in Black appears briefly and sporadically, often lingering in the background and slightly out of focus. And when we are shown a close-up of her face, deathly pale, red-eyed and grimacing, it is truly bone-chilling. This is exactly what newer supernatural horror films are missing. The apparition in this film is certainly preferable to the tacky-looking excuses for ghosts that are often churned out today. Even the updated version, which most people seem to have seen over this one, cannot match the sheer malevolence and threat of the ghost in this film. There is one appearance towards the end of the film which is particularly scarring, and is the sole instance where all subtlety is cast aside in favour of a bold, hard-hitting scare. In what is easily the movie's most memorable scene, the spectre hovers above Solicitor Arthur Kidd's bed, screeching and gliding towards him whilst he cowers beneath like a frightened child. I think we can all agree that this sort of ghostly behaviour is something you'll think about next time you think you feel safe under the covers. Because hell, you're not! 5. House LLC. House LLC was a very pleasant surprise to a lot of horror fans. The premise of a Halloween attraction gone wrong is hardly a new one, and this film doesn't exactly reinvent the subgenre, but it shows a very good understanding of what made the best found footage films so effective. Supernatural found footage films almost always work better when they adopt the less is more approach. House LLC is admittedly very in your face and over the top at times, but it still manages to creep you out and get under your skin once the initial frights have worn off. What is impressive about House LLC is that it is basically a movie that documents the behind the scenes setup of what it's eventually going to scare you with. Yet, this doesn't diminish its impact. While the acting in the first film is very believable, which is partly what makes it such a scary film, the performances in the sequels are hilarious. Still, it is a movie that will crop up at Halloween time whenever you think a haunted house might be a good idea. Spoiler, it isn't. 4. The Haunting. What do we actually see in Robert Wise's The Haunting? Bulging doors and wall panels, a doorknob turning on its own, along with a few loud thuds, that's pretty much all. But it is the horrified expressions on Nell's face that sell it, and it's mainly what makes The Haunting one of the creepiest films ever made. Despite 4 very strong leading performances, it's the house that's the real star of the show. As cliche as it sounds, Hill House feels almost like a character of its own, an ever-changing labyrinth of corridors that are impossible to navigate, making our own home something to be scared of once the credits have rolled. One scene in particular that sticks shows a horrified Nell in a bedroom surrounded by sinister giggling and moaning, desperately squeezing Theo's hand for comfort. When the disturbance ceases, she sees that Theo has been at the far end of the room, out of her reach the entire time. She then whimpers, "Whose hand was I holding?" It is such a simple scene, but it definitely has to be ranked up there with the scariest in any paranormal movie. That the recent series serves as another great adaptation of the story only serves in this movie's favour too. 3. Jaws. Say what you will about the classification of Jaws as a horror movie, but any film that made an entire generation of filmgoers afraid to take a dip deserves its place on this list. That's it, that's the entry. You will always think of Jaws when you go to the beach. It is a movie that will haunt you forever, if you've got any sort of human feeling heart in your body at least. Bruce the Mechanical Shark was intended to have a lot more screen time, had it not been for the constant technical problems that plagued the production. This was for the better, as the shark is concealed and revealed just the right amount and at exactly the right moments leading up to the climax, and aided its terrifying appeal the whole way through. Also, it is essential to mention what is one of the greatest jump scares in the history of horror movies. You know the one. Anyone who claims that one didn't get them on first viewing is just fibbing. 2. Whistle and I'll Come to You. Jonathan Miller's monochrome Nightmare is an adaptation of M.R. James's Oh Whistle and I'll Come to You, My Lad, which tells the story of a level-headed, philosophizing scholar who finds an antique whistle on a Norfolk beach and is forced to come to terms with the existence of the supernatural. The film works as a story about what happens when a rational thinker is confronted by something that exceeds the limit of human comprehension, which no other supernatural horror film has explored quite as well since. The reduction of Michael Hordern's logical academic to a mumbling, wide-eyed, thumb-sucking mess is perfect, and not unlike the reaction of the viewer. This scene plays on basic childhood fears that we've all experienced sleeping alone in a dark, unfamiliar room, when our brains would concoct nightmarish figures out of shadows and dressing gowns hung on the back of bedroom doors. 1. Black Christmas. If this picture doesn't make your skin crawl, it's on too tight. Claim the original tagline of Bob Clark's slasher prototype. Take the iconic opening scene from When a Stranger Calls, draw it out to 90 or so minutes, and throw in some terrifying POVs, and you have Black Christmas. Unlike When a Stranger Calls, the true identity, motive, and backstory of the stalker remain unrevealed by the end of the film. In fact, we never even see him. The closest we get to a physical reveal is a horrifying silhouette, a hand, and a single white eye peering through a cupboard door. The best way to describe how terrifying this film is would be to call it deceptively cozy. There is something undeniably warm and inviting about Black Christmas, probably to do with its timely setting, which is unnervingly juxtaposed by an underlying dread that lingers long after the film wraps up. That the killer isn't actually found by the end of the film makes it all the scarier. I mean, it begs the question, how do we know any case is truly closed? And that's our list. What other horror movies stuck with you long after watching? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. I've been Ash, and this has been What Culture. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and come back again soon for some more spine-tingling horror content. Thanks for watching.